So, Catherine, one of the things that as a coach, and as you start to develop your practice as a coach, you soon realise is that bringing yourself fully into the relationship with your clients, maintaining your presence is something that you need to invest in and work on.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that and how do you manage it?
Well, it's a really interesting area, I think. And if I can sort of answer that question as somebody who works a lot with new coaches, so who are coming through different programs and that sort of thing, I think initially when people come across coaching, they're sort of introduced to various kind of tools, models, principles, if you like, you know, that it's about outcomes and supporting people through change and all this kind of stuff. And so I think some of the messages that are sort of almost fed to coaches right from the start, and you know, I guess all coaching programs probably do this to some extent, is to kind of reinforce a sense that it's about tools and models and process, and that if you use these well, then you'll really be able to help somebody. But what tends to happen is pretty soon, as soon as people try to kind of apply these, they realise that there's something at play, which is all of their self-talk around trying to be helpful and trying to use tools and models and processes in the right way are actually what's causing the interference and getting in the way. So there's this kind of interesting paradox that almost comes up straight away when people are training or developing as coaches. And so I think it's interesting that actually in catching themselves in this self-talk, there's an opportunity to actually become, firstly, present to themselves in a way which maybe they haven't really done before. And it may start off a little bit sort of negative, like, oh, you know, I'm trying to help again, or I've got a solution that I think I want to give, and this is what I'd like to say to this other person that's really going to help move them on. They sort of remind themselves, actually, it's not about that. It's all about, you know, the other person. And so that can surface as a kind of conflict. But I think what can then shift, which is quite interesting, is then just recognising that's what's happening. Okay, so I feel like I have a solution that I want to offer. Oh, okay. I'm just going to notice that that's there, and almost then just let it kind of fade away. Yeah, and if it keeps coming up, then maybe I might listen to it and recognise perhaps there is something that I could offer in. And so I think that's sort of an example of where I think coaches almost develop a sort of natural mindfulness to their own thoughts as they struggle with really, well, I suppose it's essentially about adopting new behaviours, new thought patterns, ways of working, ways of being helpful that they've never really consciously sought to do previously. So I think through some of these challenges and self-doubt and trying too hard and questioning, that paradoxically it's when we struggle with those things that we actually learn to kind of adopt a more mindful kind of approach. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does really resonate. And one of the things I'm curious about is what you think can help coaches, whether they're new coaches learning things for the first time or experienced coaches who are learning new things, who are coming up against the next kind of step or barrier for themselves. So what can we do to give us greater access to mindfulness?
Good question. I think, I think this is where we need to look at coach development as being something much broader, much more holistic. So if we're talking about mindfulness specifically, I don't think it's at all satisfactory to sort of look at mindfulness as some sort of a coaching tool. Oh, you know, we're going to do mindfulness now, right? You know, let's just be in the present moment, shall we? Okay, let's get started. You know, it doesn't work like that. So it's something that we really have to kind of develop, and it's a muscle that we strengthen in ourselves first and foremost, before we ever think about sort of necessarily introducing it to clients as a way, as a practice for themselves. And you know, there are a lot of different schools of mindfulness, different approaches that you can use. I think there's a sort of westernized view which is a sort of set of practices which are much more around things like stress management or pain relief, and that, we're starting to see those kind of things coming through. So you can either choose to develop mindfulness through a more, I suppose, a kind of spiritually based route if you choose, or you can do it in ways which are more about, as we said, the kind of stress management side, which I guess can help coaches really to tune down all the self-talk that is leading to performance anxiety, that is stressing about, am I sufficient? Am I adequate to work with this person? Do I have the right things in my toolkit? And actually, it's when we learn to quieten those things that we actually really can come into presence. And I think this is where people talk about mindfulness as a kind of a gateway into presence. When I can really still that self-talk and just really be in the moment, become awake in the moment to myself and what I'm noticing in my mind and in my body, and to the other person, that we're able to enter presence and just really be there for another human being. So I think, there's something about, at the heart of coaching, this is about the interaction between two fellow human beings who are both on their own journeys, and their journeys are somehow interacting in that moment.
Yeah. And that really resonates with me. I love that phrase that you used about flexing that muscle, practicing that muscle, because I do think that without investing in being present for yourself in the first instance, it's really hard then to just switch that on.
Yeah.
In the same way as you need to kind of go running in order to become fitter, in order to take part in a race with other people. There's something about that need almost to train.
Yeah.
To develop that facility. That really resonates with me. And
I think there's also something about, other people have written about, what's the difference between presence and mindfulness, and what's their relationship as well. And I don't really feel I want to kind of go into all of that here and now. But I think there's definitely something about setting your intention and almost kind of losing the, or putting to one side any desire really to help or shift or make changes for another person, which again is paradoxical. It's almost like the more I can let go of my desire to help this person to change, the more I create the conditions for them to uncover some of those things for themselves. And don't get me wrong, it's not about forgetting all of our coaching toolkit, but actually what happens is, as I'm present to another human being, as and when those tools are going to be useful, then they'll come naturally into the conversation rather than me necessarily trying to sort of work them in. Yeah,
so it's having those as facilities, as capabilities, but almost allowing them to be called on as they're needed, rather than having them in the way, having them between you and the client.
Yeah, definitely. And so, for me, there's something, it kind of goes back to some of the kind of Rogerian principles of the necessary and sufficient conditions for the therapeutic work, as it was in those days, to take place. That it's very much in the relationship between the coach and coachee. And interestingly, actually, towards the end of his life, he wasn't able to complete the work, but Carl Rogers really started to appreciate this thing which he called presence, a way of being that really kind of amplified the potential for demonstrating unconditional positive regard, empathy and congruence, or genuineness, as it's sometimes called. So he was starting to really move towards a sense of, and there's something that seems to kind of almost bind all of these qualities together. One of his colleagues, Gene Gendlin, he put his emphasis on less on what is the counsellor or the therapist doing to enable the other person to change, which is what Carl Rogers was essentially looking at. And he was looking at what is the client doing for themselves. And that's quite interesting as well, because what he discovered was he could almost predict which clients are going to benefit most from therapy by observing how at ease they were at just tuning into themselves. So getting in touch with the kind of thoughts and feelings that almost aren't yet in words. And those were the people who would be guaranteed to make most progress. And so I think there's something that we can take from that as coaches to say, if I can just be present to somebody, to really enable them to feel safe in kind of connecting with parts of themselves that they haven't really tuned into yet. Yeah, which might be a kind of actual felt sense of something. Yeah. And if I can make it safe enough, and if I can be present enough to that person for them to make that contact and to hear themselves saying things that they haven't heard themselves say before, or to come up with an image or something that kind of really, just captures what it is that this thing is like for them, yeah, then I'm actually supporting them in transformational change, because these things haven't emerged before. Yeah, it's all new material, which then, often is the thing that provides the keys and the clues and the insights that really help people to make those kind of dramatic and significant shifts. So I think we provide the conditions for somebody to access within themselves these kind of powerful clues, if you like, that that are held in the body.
Oh, that's absolutely fascinating, and I do so agree. And there's something there, I think, for coaches that can sometimes be a challenge, which is around the need to be of service and the need to feel that they're being actively of service.
Yeah.
And again, it's your own mindfulness that can allow you to recognise that in yourself and almost to move it to one side, get it out of the way, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you.